Okay, let's get started with our first. Wait, hold up. Okay. All right, let's get started. Here's our first problem: plotting a point in the coordinate plane. Okay, before we get started, I want to let you know that all the numbers to the right here on this is the horizontal line here that's going straight across. The line that's going up and down is the vertical line. Okay, so this is the horizontal and this is the vertical. This line here, you can see it has an X. So all the numbers that we're looking for, if it's on the X line here on this horizontal line, it's here. So these are the positive numbers on this side, and this side has all the negative numbers. Okay, this here is the vertical line, and up top here we have all the positive numbers, and you can also see the Y there, and then all the negative numbers are on the bottom. Okay, so let's get started. It says using the pencil, plot the point. So here the first number will always represent X and the second number will always represent Y. Okay, so this here, right here in the center, right here where you see my pointer, that is considered to be a 0. Okay, it's not there, but it's 0. All right, so the first number that we're looking for is a -1. So we'll go over 1 here to the negative side, and then we'll go up 5. And so we'll go up here to 5. And that's it. So you don't actually circle, put a dot there to represent the 1. Once you find the second number, then that's where you put the dot. So you go over 1 and then up 5. And then you can see the answer here. It went over 1 and up 5. Okay, let's move on to the next answer. Well, next question. Okay, here we're going to use the function rule. This type of problem is table for the linear equation. So here we have X, and they've given us all the numbers for X, and we have to find what Y is. So the only thing that we're going to do is every time you see an X, we're going to represent one of these numbers. Okay? So here we are, we have Y equals 3X plus 5. So we have a -6 for the first number. So the only thing we're going to do is replace that X with the -6. And then we'll multiply 3 times a -6 gives us an 18. We'll bring over or bring down the plus 5. And then so we'll say -18 plus 5 equals 13. Please keep in mind that you can use your calculator. That way you ensure you get your answer right. So make sure you use your calculator definitely once you get to a certain point in your problem. Okay, here, so now we have to use the second number. We use here the -3. So what we would do here, we will say 3 times a -3 plus 5 equals 4. So we'll say 3 times a -3 plus 5 equals 4. You can put that in your calculator, and then you will do the same here with Y. Well, 3 times 0 plus 5 equals 5, and 3 times 3 plus 5 equals 14. And you can just put that into your calculator. You can also see here where if you click on the computations, if you want to see it all written out, you can here. Okay, so you can see here where it multiplied 3 times a -3 gives you a -9 plus 5. It gives you -9 plus 5 gives you a 4. And so it kind of gives you an example on how to work out all those problems. Okay, let's move to the next one. Identifying solutions to a linear equation in 2 variables. Here, the only thing we're going to do is we're going to use this problem here where it says 2x minus 9y equals 15. Remember I stated earlier, I said the first number always will equal x and the second number will always equal y. So the only thing that you're going to do here is replace this x with the -5 and replace the y with a -2. When you get here, you're going to replace this x. You're going to put a -6 and then a -3. For the third one, you'll put a 7 in replace of x and a 5 there. And then for the last one, you'll put a 3 and then a -1 for the y. And the only thing you would do is just take the problem and solve it and see if you're going to equal up to 17. If the solution equals up, I mean not 17, 15. If the solution equals 15, that means that the equation is true. If not, it means that it's false. So here, what they did is just like I said, they put the -5 in replace of the x, and they put a 2 in replace of the 5. So they said 2 times -5 equals a -10. And then here, 9 times 2 equals 18, brought down a negative sign. And then we have equals 15. So we have, you were right, -10 minus 18 equals 15. And then you will have to, subtract here, and you use your calculator, will equals 28, and which is false because the answer is a -28 and not a 15. So that will be false. The second one, you will put a -6 in replace of the x and a -3 in replace of the y. 2 times -6 equals a -12. And then here you have a -9 times a -3. A negative times a negative equals a positive. That's why that sign changed there. So that would be 27, and they have 27. And then so a -12 plus 27 equals 15. And so the solution is true. And so you will just continue this throughout all of your problems. Okay, let's move to the next step. Finding a solution to a linear equation in two variables. Find an ordered pair x, y that is a solution to the equation. X minus 4y equals 8. Now in this type of problem, in order to find a pair, you can replace the x or you can replace the y. Here they are replacing the y with the 0. That's probably the easiest route to go. But however, you do have other options that you can use. So here they replace the y with 0. If you replace the y with 0, it's gonna you'll know what the pair is in the end for the x and the y. So you will have x minus 4 times 0 equals 8. So if you have 4 times 0, that's going to cancel that out automatically and leave you with x equals 8. Okay, so now we know what our x is, right? Because our x equals 8 because we replaced the y with the 0, and the y is a 0. So that's how you would do that. It would be 8 and 0 would be the ordered pair. Now here you can see they give you different options. You could have replaced the y with a 1 instead of a 0. And if you had done that, you would have got x equals 12, and then the y would have been 4. So it would have been the x would have been y, and then as you can see here, the x would have been 12 and the y would be 1. Okay, all right, let's move on to the next problem. Graphing a linear equation of a form y equals mx. For this type of problem, you only need to graph 2 of the points. However, 3 is given, but you only need to graph 2 in order to create the line. Okay, so you can see here we have x equals 0 and y equals 0, 1 equals x and y equals 4, x equals 2 and y equals 8. Of course, we only have to graph 2 of the lines. So here we have the first one, 0 and 0, x is 0, y is 0. So you will just put your point there, right here in the center. And then the next one is x equals 1. We'll go over 1, and y equals 4. And you can see they've already plotted that one there. So that will be the second plot. Now, if the third plot would be 2 over 2 and 8. So you would just go over 2 and then up 8. However, you're only required to plot 2. So that was how they drew the line off of the 2 lines that they plotted. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Graphing a line given its equation in slope-intercept form, integer slope. Now in this type of problem, when you're working with the slope, you do have to plot all 3 points. But it's very similar to the last problem. But here, I always like to go ahead and plot anyway 3 points for this one. However, is not absolutely necessary, but it's the same exact thing. The only thing you would do is we would say 0 and a -5. So here we find out 0, and then remember a -5, you would go down. So you would plot it here on the y. Okay, and so then the next one is x1 or 1x. You go over 1 because it's a positive x, and then a -3, which means you would go down. You would go down 3. Okay, so you have 1 and a -3 here. All right, and then you have a 2 and a -1. You have 2, and then you apply a -1 there. You can see all 3 of them will be on the same line. Okay, all right, let's move to the next problem. Graphing a line given its equation in standard form. 3x plus y equals -3. So here what we have to do is we have to replace, you see here they have x, they have 0, 1, and 2. So what we're going to do here is we're going to replace the x with 0, 1, and a 2. So for the first problem, you can see here, they wrote it out here up top, and they said y equals -3x minus 3. So what they did here was replace that x with a 0. So when they multiplied a -3 times a 0, that gave them a 0, and then they just brought over the -3. So what we have here is a 0 and a -3 is the answer. For the next problem, what they did was they replaced the x with a 1. So they worked out the problem. They wrote, well, what you should do is write a -3, and then in replace of the x, put a 1 there, and then write out a -3. So you will have a -3 times 1 gives you a -3 minus 3 equals a -6. So make sure you use your calculator to work it out. The next problem, they used the 2 to replace the x. So how they wrote that problem out was y equals a -3, and then in parentheses you put a 2 and then a -3. So -3 times 2 equals a -6 minus 3 equals a -9. Once again, make sure you use your calculator. I'm using my phone, my calculator on my phone. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Sorry, before we move on to the next problem, make sure that you do go ahead and plot your point. So you have a 0 and a -3. You'll start here at the 0 and go down 3. And then you have a 1 and a -6. You'll go over 1 on the positive side, and you'll go down to the -6. And then you can plot your line here. Okay, let's move to the next problem. Graphing a vertical or horizontal line. Graph the line y equals 2. So here we know already that this horizontal line is an x, and then the y is the vertical line is the y. So here we would go up to 2 because it said y equals 2. So you would go here because that is a positive 2. And then any of the points on the y-axis will coordinate 2. Here they have a -5 and a negative that would go over 5, and then 2. It's a positive 2. If it had a -2, it would be down here. But since it's a positive 2, they went over 5 and up 2. And then they said 3 and 2, so they went over positive 3, up 2. They also could have gone over 7, up 2. They could have chose all of the ones on the x coordinate, and then that any other ones on that y coordinate actually could have been the example of points that you could have used. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Finding x and y intercepts given the graph of a line on a grid. So here it is given, they've already given us the problem here. It says A, the line intersects the y-axis at 0 and 3. Okay, so the first thing we would do is find the 0 on the x-axis, and then we'll find the 3 on the y. So 0 is here, as we've already stated before, and then we'll go up 3 in a positive direction. And so we'll go up 3. Okay, so that's the y-intercept there. So you'll mark that dot. And then it says the line intersects the x-axis at 1 and 0. So we'll go over 1, okay, and then it says 0. So we doesn't go up or down because we are at the 0 point. So we have our x and y intercept, and then you could just draw your line here. Okay, and so here's your answer: y intercept 3, x intercept 1. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Finding the slope given 2 points on the line. So you can see here we've already talked about where's the x and the y. So now in order to find the slope, you can see here it says the slope equals rise over run. So to be more exact, the rise is y and the run is x. Okay, now you see they have that way that they work it out here, and they give you a lot more information. However, I'm going to tell you how I work out this type of problem. And I simply, of course, use all of these same numbers, but I just go down here and I say, you can work it out this way or this way, which is pretty much the same way. However, I prefer using this way because the 9 is the larger number, and so I like to have that number in front. It's just a personal preference. So what I would do is I would write out y equals a -4 minus 6, and then at the bottom I'll put x equals 9 minus 3. Now what I did was use my calculator, and what I did was I just entered in -4 minus a -6, and then that gave me a 2, and then 9 minus 3 gave me a 6. And so then you have to simplify it, and so 2 going into 1 time, 2 goes into 6 3 times, so the slope is 1/3. All right, let's move on to the next problem. Finding the slope of horizontal and vertical lines. You're going to work this problem out pretty much just like we just worked the previous problem out. You're going to have the slope, the rise and the run, with the rise being y, the run being x. And so you can see here with the first problem, you have 6 and 6. The x is 6 and y equals 6. And on here on the other set here, you have a -6 and a 6. And so they worked that problem out here for you for the slope and did the rise and the run. And so they got 0 over a -12, which gives you a 0. And then here for the second problem, they have a -7 and a -7, and then 4 and a -7. And they worked that problem out here. They did -7 minus a -7, which gives a 0, and then here 4 minus -7 is an 11, and so 0 over 11 equals 0. Please keep in mind and use your calculator to get the answers right if you're not sure with the negative and positive signs, what you should be doing. Okay, and so you can see here that we have the slope of 0 for both answers. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Graphing a line given its slope and y-intercept. Graph the line with y-intercept 1 and slope -3/5. Okay, when you have just one number and it says y-intercept 1, then that means they're giving you the y already. So then the other the x would just automatically be 0 because they're giving you y and they didn't give you x, so that just simply means that x equals 0. Okay, and then we have -3/5, and we have the rise and the run. So the -3 is the rise, the run is 5. Okay, so keep in mind that we said the run is x and the rise is y. So that's how you would actually plot it here. So the first we would do is we would do 0 and 1. So we have 0 and 1 here. That would be the first plot. And then we have -3 and 5. So we will go over 5, and then we'll go down 3. Okay, and so that's pretty much all you would do other than just drawing your line. So you would just draw your line going through your 2 points. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Finding slope given the graph of a line on a grid. Don't overcomplicate this problem. It's actually pretty easy once you really just think about it. Okay, so here they've already given us the x and y coordinates here. We have 1 and 4 and 4 and -1. So just keep in mind to continue using that slope formula that we have here. We have slope equals rise over run. So remember, x is the run and y is the rise. So they've already given us the numbers here. So as far as the run goes, we have 1 and 4. And so you see that they put that here. And then for the rise, they have -1 and 4. Okay, so here what they did was you can use your calculator. Keep in mind, -1 minus 4 equals a -5. And then they have a 4 minus 1 equals 3. So the answer is a -5 over 3. You can see there's your answer there. Finding slope given 2 points on the line. So here you can see they've already given us the points, -3 and 7, 2 and -6. You know, once again, keep in mind that the x's are the numbers in the front and the y's are the numbers in the back. Okay, and then you can easily go ahead and write them in for the rise and the run. Okay, so here, this is what they have here. They've already gone ahead and wrote those numbers in for us. So we have a -6 minus 7 for the rise, and that gives us a -13. And for the run, we have a 2 minus -3, which gives us a 5. So the answer is a -13 over 5. Okay, you can put your answer there. Let's move on. Finding the slope of horizontal and vertical lines. Here you can see they gave us 2 problems that we have to work out. So here we have 3 and -3, 9 and -3. And for the second one that we have to find the slope of the line passing through the points is a a 9 and 7 and a -3 and 7. Don't forget, we always have to use the slope formula, which is rise over run. Rise is y, x is the run. Okay, so here they've already plugged the rise and run in for us. So we have a -3 minus a -3, which gives us a 0. 9 minus 3 equals 6. Whenever you have a 0 in the rise, you automatically know that the answer is going to be 0. You can finish working out the problem, or you can just stop at that point, but the answer will be 0. Here with the second problem that they gave us to find the slope here, they've already written that out as well, and you can see they have 7 minus 7, which equals 0. So you could just stop, or you can finish working it out. -3 minus 9 gives you a -12, which the answer is going to be 0. So let's move on to the next problem. Line given its slope and y-intercept. Graph the line with y-intercept -2 and slope 5. Keep in mind that we've already stated that if you have the y-intercept and it's already giving you the y-intercept, and they have here, which is a -2, and they did not give us the x, then we automatically know that it's going to be 0. So for the first set of points we'll be looking for will be 0 and a -2. And so we will go here and we'll say 0 here because that's at the first point. And then we have your -2 here. Remember, the negative is towards the bottom on the y coordinate, in the y plane. So we'll go 0, -2. Okay, next we have a slope of 5. Okay, so 5 will equal the rise, and then 1 would be the run. Okay, so if the run is 1 and the rise is 5, we use this to find the second point on the line. So what we would do next is, because we already have a 0 and a -2, so that means that we will run over 1 like it did here, and then we'll go up 5. Okay, and so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so what that gives us for our next set of points is 1 and 3, because we ran over 1 and then we actually went up 3. We went up 5, but it was 3 once we passed the x the x line here, the x coordinate. So once we moved up 3 points. So our answer would be 1 and 3. And then please don't forget to draw your line here. Okay, because we already had the point from 0 and -2 here. So we definitely will go ahead and mark that point. And then when we ran over 1 and up 5, we will mark that point as well. So then you can go ahead and draw your line through the points. Problem, we work it out very similar to the other problem, because you have to rise and run here as well. So just pay attention closely, because if you had a problem with the one previously, maybe this will help you to kind of understand it a little bit better. Okay, so here we have to graph the line with slope 1/3 passing through the points -2 and 1. Now what I would do here first is go ahead and graph -2 and 1 first. That's what I would do first. So I would go here and I would do -2. Remember that's 0. I would do -2 and 1. Okay. Then we have to rise 1, run 3. So we have -2 and 1. I'm trying to get it all on the same page. Let me see. Let me go up. Okay. Okay, so we have -2 and 1. We've already put our dot there. And then what we need to do is run 3. So we'll run 3. So that'd be 1, 2, 3. And then we will rise 1. So we'll go up 1. And so then that gives us our next dot there. And so the only thing we have to do next is just draw our line straight across. So we have all of our points. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. And y-intercept of a line given its equation in the form y equals mx plus b. This problem is really simple. So let's just go ahead and get started. So we have the problem here. It's already written out. It says y equals -1/3x minus 7. So it's already written out. So it already gives us x, right? So x, and then it already gives us y. So we know what the y is here because, well, it didn't say y here, but we know this is the x, right? So we know that it asks us to find the y-intercept. Well, it has to be 7 because this here, 1/3 is x, right? So the only thing we would do is say y-intercept equals a -7, and then the slope equals a -1/3. That's it. Let's move on to the next problem. Finding the slope and y-intercept of a line given its equation in the form of ax plus by equals c. Find the slope and the y-intercept of the line. 4x minus 3y equals a -3. Write your answer in simplest form. So you can see here they've given us the formula here, the problem here. It says 4x minus 3y equals a -3. So what they did first was they subtracted 4x from both sides. So they just simply wrote out 4x minus 4x minus 3y equals a -3, and then they were left with a -3 equals a -4x minus 3. So after they did that, then they divided 3 by both sides. Once they divided 3 by both sides, you can see here 3 over -3 left them here with this -1, and then they have a -4 over -3, and then that left them with 4 over 3x minus 1 times a -1, and so that left them with 4 over 3x plus 1. So the slope is 4 over 3, and the y-intercept is 1. Pretty much requires us to write it out write out the equation. So it says write an equation in slope-intercept form for the line with y-intercept 1 and slope -3/5. Okay, so here we know we already have our equation written out. So we already know that mx equals the slope and b here equals the y-intercept. And so they've already given us the numbers that would go into this formula. So we'll write out y equals -3/5x plus 1. Problem. This problem is very similar to the last problem, writing an equation and grafting a line given its slope and y-intercept. Write an equation in slope-intercept form for the line with slope of 1/4 and intercept -6. And then you have to graph the line. Okay, we already know what the slope is given that to us. So we would just simply write that out as 1/4 for the slope, and then the intercept is the y-intercept is 6. So it will be 1/4 minus 6 will be our equation that we would write out. You can just write it out. I know they give you a lot of information here. Please review it if you need it. But that's pretty much all you would do there, is just write that out. The next thing we would do is go ahead and plot it on our graph. So here we already know that this is our y-intercept. So we have a -6 here. So we automatically know that since the x wasn't, it's not pointed out for us, it's not really just given straightforward to us, so we automatically know that that's a 0. So we will start here on our number line as 0, and then we will go down -6. So that would be our first plot. And you can see that kind of gives us the answer here to 0 and a -6 if you was unsure about the other point. So that would be 0 and then a -6. Now we also have 1/4. Remember how we did before previously when we did the rise over run. Here we go, rise over run, and we have the rise is 1, the run is 4. So that simply means that we're gonna run over 4 because this is our run is 4. So we'll go over 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we will rise 1, and then that's our next point. Okay, and then you just draw your line through the points, and that's how you work that problem out. Requires you to interpret the problem. So you're really not working anything out here. You just have to interpret what it is that you are reading. My suggestion is for you to have a notepad somewhere where you can kind of write out what they're saying. So that way maybe you can figure out the answer. So here is the question. Owners of a recreation area are filling a pond with water. Let Y represent the total amount of water in the pond in liters. Okay, so make sure you write that out. So I just simply wrote Y equals total water. Okay, then it says let X represent the total number of minutes that the water was added. So then I wrote X equals minutes that the water was added. Suppose that X and Y are related to the equation 300 plus 2x equals y. Okay, so now here are the questions here that we have to answer right here. What is the change per minute in the water of the pond? Okay, so it was given to us. It said that we needed to let X represent the total number of minutes the water was added. So we can interpret that into saying, hey, it's 27. So it would be 27 liters. So we will put that there. Okay, and then it says, what is the starting amount of water in the pond? And we will just simply say 300. So it's all a matter of interpretation. You can go ahead and read all of this stuff out, but this is not a problem that you necessarily, like I said, have to work out, where there's nothing to work out. It's just this problem requires you to interpret what it is that you're reading. Evaluating functions, linear and quadratic or cubic. Okay, for this type of problem, we're working out a function, so you just simply have to replace the letter with a number. You can see here where it says f of x equals 3x squared minus 3x. So here you have to find x. So everywhere you see this f and then x in parentheses next to it, you know that the x has to be replaced with this -5. So you will replace this x with a -5. You will put that -5 in parentheses, and then you will put the exponent of 2 on the outside of the parentheses. Here you have g with an x beside it, and so where you see the problem here, like at the bottom it has a g, then you will replace this x with a 7. So here you have a -5, and then this x will be replaced with a 7 plus 2, and then you'll just simply work the problem out. Here they wrote out a -5 so you wouldn't forget, and the 7, and so they went ahead and replaced the x with a -5 here and a -5 there. And so what they did was multiply 3 times a -5 squared, which gave them 75, plus 15, and they got the 15 when they multiplied here. Make sure you use your calculator, and then when they added 75 plus 15, that gave them 90. And then for g, they did the same thing, and they replaced the x with the 7. So -5 times 7 gave them 35 plus 2. And then so they have a -35 plus 2 gives them a -33. And that's the answer. I think this is the last problem, so let me double check. This problem requires you to once again interpret and understand what it is that you're reading. So let's go ahead and go over it. Finding outputs of a two-step function with decimals that models a real-world situation. Lamar rented a truck one day. There was a base fee of $10.75, and there was an additional charge of 6 cents for each mile. The total cost C in dollars for driving X miles were given the following function. So we have C, and then it has an X, and that simply means that we're going to have to put something in replace of X. Okay, so we have the 6 cents that was given in the problem. It said there was charged 6 cents for each mile driven. So that's where that 0.06 cents come from. And then we have the $10.75, which was the base fee. Okay, so here at the bottom it says, what is the total rental cost if Lamar drove 40 miles? Okay, so remember it said the total cost C in dollars for driving X miles is given the following function. So X is actually going to be replaced with 40. Okay, so they just simply added 40 to the problem and worked it out. So they wrote down how you work it out is you would say you can just go down here if you can see it, 0.06, and they replaced that X with 40 plus $10.75. So when they multiplied 6 cents times 40, it came up to $2.40 plus $10.75, which was the base price, and it came up to $13.15 for the total price. The absolute last problem. Okay, so this one is very similar to one that we've already worked previously. It says graphing a function of the form f of x equals ax plus b integer slope. So the graph, it says graph the function f of x equals 2x minus 5. So keep in mind, we see f with the parentheses of x. That simply tells us right away that we're going to know that we're going to put something in place of x. And so the easiest numbers to choose would be 0, 1, and 2. So when we work this problem out, you're going to simply say 2 times 0 minus 5. And so they've already worked that out here. And it would be 0, -5 would be your values that you would have there. And then you will the next number that you will replace the x with will be 1. So you will say 2 times 1 minus 5, and that will give you 1 and -3. And then you have the next number will be 2, and then you will replace the x with the 2, so that would be 2 times 2, and that will give you 4 minus 5. And so you work that out, and then that will give you plots 2 and -1. So the next thing you would do is just simply plot all of your numbers here. So you have 0 and -5, so it would be 0 here, You would go down 5, and then you have 1. You would go over 1, down 3, and then you have 2 and -1, and you don't have to plot that. You only have to plot 2. All right, that's it for this week. Have a great day. Bye.